It's a brand new week and we're glad to have you on Business Morning. I am BC Adebayo. Now, oil prices are down again today on signs that worldwide oil storage is failing rapidly, which raises concerns that production cuts will not be fast enough to fully offset the collapse in demand from the coronavirus pandemic. Brent crude was down 2.1% at $21 a barrel, while WTI June futures for the U.S. fell 8.8% to $15.45 a barrel, and that was in early trade. Now, oil futures marked the third straight week of losses last week and have fallen for 8 of the past 9 weeks, with Brent ending down 24% and WTI off around 7%. Meantime, the dwindling demand for crude oil has not only had an impact on Nigeria as an oil-dependent country, but also on the indigenous companies operating in the upstream of the oil and gas sector. The local players in this industry say they are recording huge losses of revenue arising from the falling oil prices and the absence of uptake given the shutdown of the global economy. This has also affected their cash flow, hindering capacity to meet loan obligations as the fall due. And, of course, not forgetting the impact on the operations of oil producers, which may lead to job losses. The chief executive of Degeconek and former president of Nigerian Association of Petroleum Explorationists, Mr. Biodun Adesoya, joins us now to tell us more about the ordeal of operators in the industry. Good morning. Could you just paint a picture of what Nigeria's upstream oil and gas industry is like now in the face of the trend in the global oil market?
Good morning, BC. Can you hear me very well?
Very well.
Okay. Well, the situation is, to say the least, is precarious at the moment. There are challenges almost in any direction you turn to. The chief of those challenges is the fact that revenues have dwindled and will dwindle for some time to come. Issues of employment, job security is there. Abilities to meet loan repayment obligations are there. Operations in generally have been impaired as well. So the list goes on, and almost like I said, in every direction you turn, there is no good news at all.
Of course, there's no good news at all. And adding to that is a prolonged shutdown of the pipeline due to the country's inability to meet its crude oil quota and impact of revenue generation. But how long do you think the Trans-Forcados pipeline would be shut?
The pipeline issues have been off and on for quite some time. I mean, in the recent weeks, we've seen force majeure come up and force majeure, stopped and all of that. It's very difficult to predict how long those challenges will be on, and that's a layer on top of the global challenges that everybody's having at the moment as well.
Well, it's also public knowledge now that Nigerian banks are broadly exposed to the oil and gas industry, but one would have thought that situations like this would by now be presenting matching solutions from the experiences of the 2008-2009 economic downturn.
Oh, well, as you know, it's not a new thing that oil prices go up and go down. It's just that this is the lowest and this is the worst scenario we've ever faced in recent times. The challenges on top of this fact is that we do not have any insight into how long these challenges will go on for. We don't know when, for example, the COVID-19 that is responsible for these issues, how long that challenge will be with us for, and the issues of the oil price coming back. It's going to take a while. I mean, it's faster to destroy, but very difficult and longer to build.
The quick fix solutions that operators require this period of these banks and perhaps the government?
Okay, basically, government has to come up with some sort of measures to support the upstream, especially the indigenous producers. As you know, chief of those challenges they are faced with right now has to do with the issue of loan repayment. So government through the Central Bank of Nigeria will have to come up with some measures. There are principals and there are interest rates being repaid. they have to come up with either or combination of those palliatives that need to ameliorate the challenges. I mean, one thing is clear. Repayment obligations, loan repayment obligations cannot continue in the way and manner they were doing when oil price was good.
And talking about loan repayments now, some banks have, of course, begun the restructuring of existing loans with discounts on applications. Why are operators not tapping into such opportunities?
There has been restructuring already going on even prior to now. As you know, most of these loans were taken when the oil price was even much better than the recent past. So this restructuring obviously have to come back again, and it has to be a bit more severe than what it has been in the past. That's basically the issue right now.
What would be the consequences of these bad loans if there is no intervention announced?
There's going to be massive loan default payments. There's going to be issues of liquidity in the system. It's going to be bad for the economy of Nigeria, definitely, because the sectorial lending is somewhere around 23-24%, and that's significant. So if there are issues with loan repayment, it's obviously going to affect the economy of Nigeria as a whole.
Would indigenous operators mind the conversion of those loans to equity holdings in their firms, for instance?
I believe there are all sorts of solutions that could come up. I don't know which one will be most attractive. It might be different from operator or company to company. Obviously, they are looking at all sorts of options to get out of this serious challenge they are faced with right now.
What about the role of underwriters now? How do they come in this regard?
I'm sorry, say again, please.
What about underwriters? What role do they play in this regard?
Well, everybody is affected one way or the other. I mean, the other actors in this case will be the operating companies, which we've been talking about. Then we have the lenders, which are the commercial banks. Then we have the service providers. We have government, DPR, Ministry of Petroleum Resources, NNPC. Everybody is impacted one way or the other. And that's why it has to be at the federal government level that some sort of solution will come. Otherwise, you're going to see job losses. You're going to see quite a lot of massive layoffs and lack of activities, lack of operations. I mean, it's not good news at all in any direction you face.
Now, you've talked about job losses, of course. Of course, it's bad news for everyone. But we understand that this situation has actually already begun to lead to the downsizing of the workforce in that industry. So what happens next?
We have to ride the wave as it is until we begin to see some sort of silver lining. The oil price just have to simply start going up. But let's play the devil, scenario here and come up with the fact that what do we do as a country? Because we have to look at Nigeria on a more broader sense. We just have to begin to look at how we can begin utilize our resources to solving our own economic problems within the country. And by that, I mean, we need gas for power generation, we need oil for refining and utilization, and to reduce all the other areas where we spend a lot of money, for example, in the downstream sector and all of that. These are no quick fixes because the infrastructure to do all of that will take some time to come as well. So, but there has to be a strategic rethinking at the federal government level on how to speedily begin to scale down a lot of, dependency on exportation of Nigeria's crude oil, as it were.
Now, for the local content policy now, how does this situation actually affect it for the oil and gas sector?
It's going to be, you're going to see a lot of contracts, revocation, cancellations. You're going to see basically inability to do anything. A lot of companies are going to close shop and fold up, possibly in a worst case scenario. It's impacted in similar ways. A lot of local content operators are exposed. financially as well, not just the operating companies. The service providers are equally exposed financially. There are contracts that have been signed that are being cancelled at the moment. So again, like I said, no good news in any direction you face.
But what kind of palliatives would you advocate for the players at this time?
We have to take it step by step. For the banks, which is where the biggest issue appears to lie right now, the Central Bank of Nigeria have to evolve a policy to suspend the loan repayments. The loan repayment has to be suspended for this period because, like I said, it's not possible to meet your loan repayment obligations in the way and manner one is doing before these problems came up. So that would be number one. Number two, like the rest of the country, the federal government have to come up with a way to support every Nigerian going through this problem. And I don't want to limit that to the upstream or the oil industry alone. It's going to be everybody that is affected in similar ways in that case.
Are you expecting any kind of moratorium from the banks?
Oh yeah, I mean, the moratorium is one option because that needs to come back and give them some leeway to catch up their activities again and improve on their revenue stream. And when that comes, and the way and manner that moratorium will come is basically what I've said in another way, which is suspension of the principal as well as the interests on the loan repayment. Those needs to be suspended and given a period of time. I would say probably a year or more in order before this can be resumed, because this problem, from all indications, even if COVID-19 issue is resolved, the oil industry has this slow response. And don't forget also the fact that there's an oversupply in the system. So you need to mop up that oversupply before you can begin to see new supplies, new crude oil sales and all of that. Every of the tanks or reservoirs of the end users, of the users, are full at the moment, and nobody is buying, and that's why you had the negative oil price in the WTI, and the oil price is trading for like $20 per barrel at the moment for the Brent.
Another issue that many would, want to know about is what are the reasons for the difficulty in the purchase of Nigeria's crude, and that's despite the lower oil price?
Well, there's a glut in the supply system. We have so much oil in the market. So many countries are beginning to be oil and gas producing countries. Countries that used to be Nigeria's customers in the past are now producing oil on their own. And therefore, the option of market is narrowed significantly. The Chinese, of course, the issue of COVID-19 started from there. The Indians, everybody, these are the areas. So the biggest challenge is being able to sell that crude oil. And one of the measures that has been taken is, apart from the fact that there's been a cut in the OPEC quota that Nigeria has, is the fact that producing companies have been instructed within the country to actually, shorten or reduce their production, because we can't, obviously, all tanks are filling up, let me put it that way.
With these issues now, what's the likelihood that operators will be able to meet the already reduced production of oil?
Meeting the OPEC quota is the easiest option. It's not a problem at all to do that. The problem right now is that even despite meeting that quota, we're still having low oil price, or we will still have low oil price. And we will still have shortages in revenue stream, and we'll still have defaults in all the various obligations that the operating companies have. Those issues will remain with us until and the only option I can see is a government intervention, a CBN intervention, and it has to be significant intervention to rescue some of these companies from going down completely.
But if those interventions don't come in, perhaps, How will indigenous oil firms be able to join forces with related multilateral bodies to see these challenges through?
They have been doing as much as possible. As you know, NNPC has been leading the operating companies, producers, indigenous and international producers alike, in putting in supporting government financially in the fight in this pandemic that we are all faced with. They're doing that. Other than that, at the OPEC level, Nigeria has done as much as it could do. Regarding the operators themselves being able to do anything, I don't know of any other measure they can take that can shore up prices or increase the situation, improve the situation that we're all faced with at the moment. I don't see much that they can do.
Mr. Desoya, well, sure that the lockdown has in any way contributed to the shortage of FX at the moment. How have you been able to cope with that?
It's a mixed bag for everybody. It's a mixed bag in all directions. For example, we at Degeconek, we've seen a reduction in our revenue stream. Of course, we had ongoing projects which we haven't been able to either complete because of access to our offices. As you know, a lot of people are working from home, but not everything can be done from home at the moment. There are some things that just have to be done in the office. Our computer workstations, for example, are tied to servers that cannot be carried easily and moved. And we don't have the infrastructure for the broadband, the level of broadband that we need. So it's a mixed bag for different companies. I can only speak about ours. We've obviously seen a reduction in revenue. We've seen a reduction in work that we do. Despite the fact that, typically and historically, when oil prices go down, it's a time for most of the companies to come back inwards and look at their assets very well and try and look at the assets, evolve strategies to improve on their performances when things improve. So that is some level of activity, but even that is severely impaired by the fact that most of the operating companies are unable to have their staff strength back to work at the level they will need it.
When the president addresses the nation on an update on the lockdown, what would you like to hear from him concerning the oil and gas sector?
I would like to hear him basically say exactly what the issues are. There's a shortage of revenue. There are challenges meeting obligations, and it will be there for some time to come. So it's direct instruction, if possible, or form up, or pass that to the economic committee to review. But we obviously like a pronouncement that, the banks have been told to support the oil companies, and the way and manner that support will come can then be passed to a lesser committee, and that would be something I would like to hear.
All hoping that this pandemic goes away as quickly as possible. But what if it stretches to perhaps the end of the second quarter, for instance? What impact do you think that will likely have?
I don't want to predict that it will stretch for too long. I mean, we're all praying that it goes very quickly. The impact will be very severe, and the news will not be good at all. But again, serious problems cause for serious solutions, serious thinking. I believe that we have to look inwards. I believe that we have to try and see how we can utilize our resources for our national development. I believe that, and this has been canvassed at several fora in the past. Federal government, through NAPE, for example, we've had that issue. This very discussion we are having now, NAPE to its members is having a discussion on Wednesday to discuss this issue with their members, looking at the impact and the challenges. And, so it's not good news. I mean, we're all just simply praying, but should it linger on, then something has to give way. We just have to evolve a new way of surviving and living. And that is not something I can easily articulate at the moment.
Chief Executive of Degeconek and former President of Nigeria Association of Petroleum Explorationists, Mr. Biodun Adesanya. Thanks for speaking with us on Business Morning.